Hello everyone, this is Shannon Flummerfelt for Flip Schools. This is the Understanding Improvement series. This video is for Central Office administrators, and it will be an introduction into understanding how to examine instructional paradigms in order to drive improvement. In the culture of Flip Schools, there will be many opportunities to consider where instruction can be improved. And as instructional processes are looked at, many times there has to be a step back even further in terms of examining the paradigms that drive those practices. So this short video will give you a couple of examples as to how to begin to examine paradigms in order to drive improvement. First of all, what are paradigms? Well, paradigms are simply ideas, philosophies, theoretical frameworks, or mental models that help us to drive to some kind of practice, some way of generalizing an idea so that it becomes a rule or a law or an application for us in our lives or in our leadership practice. So as central office administrators, paradigms are very important because they in fact drive practice, which in fact shapes culture. So it's important to understand what paradigms are in play and what kind of an impact they might have on our districts and the culture of our districts, particularly in relationship to instruction and instructional improvement. Paradigms are often represented by mental models. In fact, that's one of the ways that they can be more easily understood and examined. And so today I'm going to show you two examples of two paradigms. And these paradigms are commonly held, and they'll help you to understand and maybe even think about in your district and in your leadership practice which paradigm is more prevalent. The first example is going to lay out the paradigms that show the relationship between problems and funding. And the second paradigm is going to lay out and examine the relationship of problems to improvement. Here's the first example. In this first example, using a mental model here to lay out a paradigm that I call more problems, more money. And basically, the way that this paradigm is represented in this graphic is that, we start at the beginning and we enter our positions or we create a new project, a new department, a new process. And in the beginning, as things are just starting out, we might run into a few problems. And as we encounter those problems, this particular paradigm has us equating any problem with needing more funding or more money. So when we start off, we have a few problems, we don't need that much money. As time progresses and things become more complicated, we have more employees, we have more demand for a service that we deliver, we have more students, we have more curriculum to cover, we have more expectations in terms of student achievement scores. Whatever the complexity is that gets added, then we understand and we begin to realize that we are encountering more problems. And so again, what we do to try to solve that problem is we add more money. We look for more funds to take care of the additional problems. We begin to build more and more layers of solutions, and each one of those requires more money. And then, of course, as time goes on, things become more complicated. We have even more problems. And again, we need the most money that we've ever needed before. Now, this particular paradigm is not by any means designed to insinuate that there should be less funding for schools. This is simply a paradigm that will help you to examine what your response is in relationship to problems. So when you encounter problems, are you thinking automatically that you need to expand and add another layer of something in order to deal with the problem as it arises? And so this is one paradigm, and this paradigm is actually quite easily found. It's quite commonly used. And when we begin to feel like our districts are sort of getting too big, where they're growing beyond themselves in terms of the size of the organization, and maybe we've built more bureaucracy in our organization than we actually need, it's probably because this paradigm is in use. This paradigm has also, I think, caused a lot of criticism to come our way in public education. And so it might be time to take a look at a different paradigm, which perhaps we could publicize a little bit more. This second paradigm, in contrast to the more problems, more money, is a more problems, more improvement paradigm. And what we're saying here in this paradigm is that as we begin at the beginning and we start something, we start an initiative, a project, we create a program, we understand that we need to respond to some kind of a need in our district. So something begins, there's a starting point. And sure enough, just as in the last example, we begin to encounter problems. In this particular example, what we try to do here is, instead of looking for an enlargement of a department or an initiative or a project based on funding, we try to enlarge the project through improvement. Now, I'm not saying here that there aren't funds needed for improvement, but many times when we turn to funding as the solution to the problem, we create a codependency there that sometimes allows us to skip over and ignore this improvement step. So just for the sake of simplicity in contrasting these two different paradigms, if you'll just follow along here with me in terms of this logic. So let's say we have a blue circle problem. What we need to do is we need to size an piece of improvement that matches that problem. So whatever the problem is, let's drive improvement that's sized in scope to that problem. Again, we go on. We'll find another problem. Again, our improvement needs to be scoped out and matching the size of the problem. Many times what happens in school work that's done is there becomes a lot of emotionality and a lot of subjectivity that happens in terms of decision making in regard to how are we going to respond to the problem. And if the problem is looked at as an opportunity to improve something, then let's just right-size that instead of creating a structure or a bureaucratic response that's not needed. So again, we move on. Problems, you match the improvement. Problem, you match the improvement. So what we see here in this paradigm is not necessarily that there isn't going to be more funding that follows each one of these improvements, but that we don't necessarily turn to funding as our first way to solve the problem. Rather, we look for where can we actually improve in order to solve the problem, and then the decisions about funding and so on would follow. So I hope you can see the difference between these two different paradigms and also understand how powerful paradigms are in terms of creating cultures and driving decision-making and practice that might occur. As you work in a flipped schools culture, there are so many opportunities to talk about improvement and enact improvements. And sometimes it requires a deeper look at paradigms in order to understand why things are the way they are. So understanding improvement from a paradigm perspective can really help you sometimes to get down to the root cause of what a problem is. I hope this information has been helpful to you. If you're interested in more information, you may go to the Flip Institute website at http://theflipinstitute.com/about/. Thanks for listening, everyone. I hope you enjoyed the video.